At the beginning of the movie, we are told, Australia, after the collapse, 10 years went by. Eric, we see a man who is sitting in his car. He gets out after a while and goes into a kind of hut where Asian music is playing. He gets a drink for himself. After a failed robbery, Archie, Caleb, and Henry are speeding away in a truck. They argue about whether or not they should go back and get Henry's brother, who was hurt and left behind. Henry himself looks like he is hurt. As they are fighting, the truck crashes, and they can't get out. Caleb helps Henry out of the car while Archie messes around with Eric's car. Then, they all get in Eric's car and drive away. Eric goes outside and watches as the three thieves drive away. He gets into the truck that the thieves left behind and drives after them. Eric catches up to them pretty quickly and won't stay behind. Even when they point guns at him, Eric wants them to give him back his car, but they won't. Eric tries to choke Archie, but Henry shoots him and knocks him out. We see a soldier dying in the street, covered in his own blood. Another young man, Henry's brother, whose name is later revealed to be Ray, has also been shot, but he gets up, hobbles over to a military jeep, and drives away. Eric wakes up next to a buzzard in a field. He is there with the truck, and the people who stole his car are no longer around. Back to Ray. He parks the military jeep, gets out, and leans against a tree while he tends to his wound. Eric drives down a street where there are a lot of trailers. He goes to a place that says, food, and asks about his car. He is told that they haven't been there and that they couldn't have gotten petrol there anyway. Outside, he sees a man go into a house after going to the toilet, so he follows him inside. The house is an opium den. Everyone else is sleeping, but Eric finds a young man who is awake. He hasn't seen the car, but he thinks grandma might know about it. Eric goes to ask his grandmother about his car, but she is more interested in finding out his name and if he wants to sleep with a boy. No matter how much he asks, no one tells him anything. He walks into a room with two Asians and a dwarf and tells them that he needs to buy a gun. At last, he goes outside with the dwarf and goes to one of the trailers. They are part of a circus that moves around. Eric doesn't have $300 to give the dwarf, so he shoots him in the head and walks away. Eric asks grandma again about his car now that he has a gun. Still, she wants to know his name, and when he says he doesn't want to tell her, she says she'll call him her baby. She says she saw 3 cars with men in them going in one direction and then leaving in another. She can tell him what they drank, how they smelled, and if they talked, but they didn't say anything because they kept going. She says that he must really care about that car if he bought it. She asks him what he loves so much and asks him again what his name is. He points his gun at her, but she moves his hand away and tells him not to be silly because he is just being rude. Eric goes back to the truck and finds Ray there. Ray knows the getaway car and wants to know what happened to Henry. Eric also wants to know where his brother is, so he asks. He says he will kill Ray, but Ray is so hurt that he passes out. Eric goes into the grocery store, but a man with a gun holds him there and won't let him out until he buys something. Eric will be told where the doctor is when he does. Eric drives all night with Ray sleeping in the back seat. The doctor is already outside, and she has an older friend who helps keep an eye on the place. As they both point their guns at Eric, she tells him to pull out his gun. He does what she says, and she helps Ray. Eric doesn't tell her if Ray is his friend or not. Instead, he asks what she wants in exchange for her services. The doctor says she doesn't need money and has been fine without it. Eric goes outside to wash himself. He then sees a room full of dogs in cages and is interested in it. The doctor comes and tells her that if she doesn't lock the dogs up there, people will take them to eat. She talks about how people asked her to take care of their dogs, but then they never came back. She offers to look at Eric's cuts, but he turns her down and walks away. The next morning, Ray wakes up. The doctor wants to check him out, but as soon as Ray sits down, Eric points his gun at him and asks where his brother is. Ray tells him that he will take him to the south, where his brother is. Eric wants him to get up so they can leave, but a noise outside tells them that 2 cars are coming. Eric tells the doctor that she needs to get her gun. When the man who helps the doctor keep watch goes up to the cars, he is shot and killed. Eric can kill all of them, though. They are Asian people who were with the dwarf he killed. He tells Ray that they are leaving and puts down the crying doctor, who was crying for her friend. Eric and Ray drive for a while without talking. When Ray wakes up and asks where they are, he doesn't get an answer. He says, "I'm hungry." When it gets dark, They stop at a motel for the night. When Ray asks for food again after they've found a room, no one pays attention. Eric tells him to talk about his brother more. But he won't. Then he says that he doesn't really know where they are. Eric calls him an idiot. And Ray admits that he does know the name of the town where his brother was going. Eric takes one of his guns, empties the others, and goes outside to sit down. Ray will soon go outside to ask some of the others how far away their final destination is. He tells Eric that he was going to tell him anyway and that he is still in charge because Eric doesn't know exactly where they are in the town. Eric says he is taking Ray with him because if his brother isn't there, he is going to cut Ray's throat. Ray tells Eric his name when Eric asks who he is. Ray says that Henry had to leave quickly, which is why he isn't there with him, and he can't talk about it. Eric says that Ray was left behind to die, but Ray is sure that wasn't the case. He says over and over that he can't say much more. He and his brother Henry both believe in God, and he knows that God and Henry won't let anything bad happen to him. Eric tries to get Ray to stop believing in God and his brother. All that means is that he is there and his brother is not, and that people leave people to die. Ray gets up and goes back to where they were sleeping. When Ray was in the room, he saw one of the guns and put his own bullets in it. When soldiers pass by the motel, Ray ducks down. He doesn't answer the door when someone knocks, he just shoots. When he opens the door, he sees that he has killed a little girl who was bringing them blankets. When there are gunshots, Ray is able to close the door just in time. The window lets more people in. Eric goes there to see what's going on. Ray is scared and only gets a few shots off while cowering. Eric kills the soldier, grabs Ray, and tells her to come with him. They get in their car and leave. While they're sitting outside, Ray tells them that a woman he talked to said they'd be 8 or 9 hours away. He says that his brother needs to see a man about something and should be there for 2 weeks. Eric says that he can't trust his brother, but Ray says that he knows this himself and has also heard it from Eric. Eric says he was a farmer when Ray asks if he worked in the mines. When Ray asks him how good he is at shooting, he doesn't answer. Ray tells a story about his childhood next to a farm and the people who lived there. When Eric asks him why he is telling him this, Ray says that he just remembered it because it was interesting to him and that not everything has to be about something. Ray says that he is trying not to think about the little girl, but he can't. Eric says that he shouldn't, and that if he kills someone, he should always think about it. The next morning, while Eric is still sleeping, Ray gets up to go for a walk. The army finds Eric and takes him away. Ray looks, but she stays out of sight. While Eric is being held by the military before being taken to Sydney, he says that he already knows it is over for him and that it has been over for a long time. He asks the soldier if he knows that it is also over for him. When he was told he was going to Sydney, he asked why he wasn't just shot. The military man told him he was doing what he was told to do and that he was doing it for himself. Eric then says that he saw his wife leaving with another man, so he followed her and killed them both. It hurt him that no one went after him or cared what he did, and it hurt him more than having his heart broken. The military man won't let him say much more and says that he doesn't know what he's talking about. They hear yelling, and Ray comes in. There had already been faint sounds of gunshots. Before that, he kills the military man, but Eric tells him that he doesn't need to shoot him again to be sure. Ray lets him go, and as they walk away, Ray tells him how he got there to help Eric get away. Eric and Ray are back behind the wheel. Ray asks Eric to drive, but Eric says no. Ray says that he doesn't like not being able to talk, and then he says that his side hurts. They stop so that Eric can put water on Ray's cut and then put a bandage back on it. Then, they stop to get petrol, but the place only accepts US dollars, which Eric doesn't have any more of. But Ray has a lot of money and buys more bullets for himself and Eric. Eric and Ray stop at a fence, where Ray tells Eric that people who want to do business with his brother will be coming in a week. He tells Eric that he is sure this is true, and Eric says that he and the others will be there in the morning. At night, Ray spends a little time in the truck, singing along to a girly pop song. He finally turns off the music, takes a moment to think, then gets up and goes to where Eric is sleeping by the fire. Eric tells Ray to go back to sleep when she wakes him up to ask if he is going to kill Henry. Eric says this again when Ray tries to explain that they can take money. They drive to a neighborhood early the next morning. When they get out, Ray is in charge. After a short walk, They see Eric's car parked in front of a house. Eric starts his car. Ray is confused and asks him what he is doing. Eric then gets out of the car. He tells Ray to stay there while he checks out the house through the windows. He comes back to tell Ray that they are all asleep and tells her where the four men are. He wants Ray to bring Henry and another man to the front room, but he doesn't want them to shoot. Eric wakes up Claude and Archie by going into the house. We haven't met Ray's brother or the other man he finds. Ray doesn't sound very sure of herself, but she is able to wake up Henry, who is surprised to see her there with a gun. Eric has told his two men to go to the front room and sit on their hands. Henry pulls a gun on him while Ray looks at Eric and asks him why he is doing this. But Ray is more determined to find out why he was left behind. Eric asks what's going on once more. Ray shoots, but her shot goes wide and hits the wall. Ray is shot in the throat by Henry. Then, when Eric sees Ray dying on the floor, he shoots Claude and Archie. Henry is sad because he had to kill his brother. Eric comes over to see for himself that Ray has died. Henry wants to know what his brother's friend Eric did to him. Henry says Eric did something, but Eric says he didn't. Henry wants to know what Eric did. Eric shoots him down as he stands up. He thinks about shooting the older man on the bed, but he doesn't. He sits down on the bed where Henry was and cries while he and the other man look at each other. Eric drags the bodies, including Ray's, outside and sets them on fire. Then he goes to his car and sits down. He drives, then stops and gets out of his car with a shovel. He then goes back to the trunk to get a dead dog wrapped in a blanket and surrounded by flies, so he could bury his dog. He really needed his car back. The movie ends as he starts to dig with his shovel into the rough ground.